Okay, it is 2 o'clock, so we will call to order our regular meeting of council, and we'll start by recognizing that we are gathering today for this meeting on the unceded territories of the Huipachesset and Sechot First Nations. We do have an agenda in front of us. Are there any late items to add by councillors? Seeing none. Twyla, any late items?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, then would somebody like to move approval of our agenda?
Move approval.
Moved by Councillor Poon, seconded by Councillor Solda. All in favor? Carried, thank you. And we have minutes from the special meeting held at 10:30 a.m. and the regular meeting held at 2 p.m. on July 11th, 2022. And we will just note that the minutes are being submitted amended to reflect that both Councillor Corbeil and Councillor Solda were not in attendance.
Motion to adopt.
Okay. Second. Moved by Councillor Poon, seconded by Councillor Paulson. Any other notes on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. And we'll move on to public input period. This is an opportunity for members of public to address council on topics of relevance to City Council. We take a maximum of 4 speakers, and each speaker will get up to 3 minutes. Would anyone from the public like to come forward today? Mr. Anderson first, and then we'll go to Mr. Ambrose at the back.
Okay. I'm going to bring up an old subject, but it's important that I do this. I'm trying to bring closure to an issue that I've been involved in for 2.5 years. First of all, I seem to have a problem with City Council and staff to talk about it, and now I'm having some issues as how to bring it to closure. And I certainly don't mean any disrespect to any one or group of people, but the questions that I have for question period, I want to mention them here and give you an opportunity to respond in a proper manner. A few meetings back, and I'm sorry I don't have the date here, I asked questions through Mayor of Councillor Poon regarding contractors that worked at their facility. And I asked the question in a conversation that we had on the telephone, very brief one, I specifically said the plumbing contractor was. And I said, do you remember that conversation? And she answered me forthright right away. And I won't divulge that name. I don't think it's appropriate at this. Nevertheless, then I asked if she had discussed with City Council and our staff, and Councillor Poon said, no, why would I consult City Council? My colleagues, nothing to, and I agreed. I said, that's fair enough, but my question also said staff. And I asked the question, did you discuss with staff, meaning either the building inspector or Mr. Ply, the fact that as to who were the subcontractors? And that's part of the information that's asked when you take out permits, as late as they may be. And the answer was to that, yes. Now, for 2.5+ years, I've been asking that question of City Council and staff, Mr. Ply. And one of the answers that was mentioned a number of times was council would not have the situational awareness to answer those questions. Why is it being brought to City Council? That in itself was a problem. And it should have been a problem from every staff members that you weren't being kept aware of for 2 years, the events that were surrounding that issue. I'm not asking for a response to that. I just want that to be understood. So my question at question period will be, why did I never, and I've never got an answer from city staff as to who the subcontractors were? Simple little question, and I never asked for names. But I'm going to get an answer, and I said that at a meeting we had, Mayor, with yourself and Scott Smith and 2 council members.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. We will welcome you back up during question period for that question. Our 3-minute timer is up for this portion.
I didn't see the clock going.
Our apologies. We felt like the actual timer coming up on the screen was a little bit obnoxious, so we're trying to not do that
Okay,
anymore.
there's another question, but fair enough.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Ambrose, if you'd like to come up next.
Yes, Keith Ambrose, 3147 on Second. Unfortunately, folks, my subject matter is as old as Neil's. Now, I'm just going to remind you, pre-COVID, I came to council when you were talking about the uptown revitalization. Now, I signed up for 10 minutes to speak on that subject matter. I sat patiently. The lady before me spoke for approximately 12. I got home and learned that. I spoke for approximately 8 because I was cut short. I was pressured. I never came back. I'm not sure a young person would have the fortitude I have. I'm a lot stronger than a lot of people think, so I'm here. And like Neil, I ain't going away easy. So, last visit, Madam Mayor, you excused yourself, and where the subject matter was the soup kitchen, or rather the temporary shelter permit for the soup kitchen property. Now, again, I feel slighted. I signed up for 10 minutes. I was taken down to 4. I fought my way back. I didn't get my subject matter on the table, though, because I was put off of my subject matter to defend myself, to try to find the time and to tell you people. A young person doesn't stand a chance of coming before council if you're not going to show them the respect they deserve, despite the opinions. I have opinions, and I know they're not popular sometimes. I know one thing I've learned in my 60 years here is that when somebody speaks the truth, others are either offended, shocked, speechless, motivated to act. A lot of things happen. Back when it was the Uptown Revitalization, I think the city spoke, not just me, but other folks did, and convinced you guys to change course. You did, amicably, nicely, thank you. Because I'm not against the revitalization of the Uptown Corp. It's back on the agenda, I see, though, and I'm scared because I see another agenda. I see an agenda there that I don't like. I spoke about that. I don't think we should be making a business of importing people in need and putting them in the Uptown Corp. I think we should solve the problems we have. But nonetheless, I'm going to come and speak again. I'm still angry, so I need to calm down to speak. But for everybody, for anybody who comes to speak before council, despite, you know, what you might think personally of them or what their opinion is, you know, good, bad, or indifferent, this is our only chance to speak. You know, during COVID, I was silenced because I'm an old guy. I don't run a computer. I don't do anything in the modern way. I'm trying to back out of that. So I'm cut out. It's not I don't feel this is an inclusive society or an inclusive town. I really don't have that feeling. This doesn't include me. I'm just a retired taxpayer. I don't have a large income at all. And now I'm concerned for my city. It's the only time in my life I have been. I've been coasting along, but now I'm actually concerned, so I'm just trying to do something positive. Whether it comes out as negative, it's for the right reason I make my suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Ambrose, I did just want to apologize that I think we did have a miscommunication last time, and I actually just pulled I know I wasn't in the room, but I just pulled your email back up because it was included in the agenda package, and it said that you request to speak before City Council on Monday, July 11th, regular council meeting. So I completely see that you did make the request. I think the confusion was that you didn't request to be a delegation. So we didn't realize that you wanted that 10-minute spot. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
And also to recognize that sometimes we just expect that people understand our processes and know what they are. And it's not as simple. We know that delegation is 10 minutes and public input is 3 minutes, but you may not. So sorry for that
information wasn't there. You're correct.
Yeah,
so thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem.
And the next time I will put it there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other members of the public who would like to come forward today? Okay. Then we will move on to delegations, and we will start with Friends of the Bird Street Beaver Ponds.
Hi.
And Sorry, for, following back up on that, not everybody knows our process. Just to be clear, for delegations, we do give 10 minutes, and then we leave time for questions from council afterwards. So we will start a clock of 10 minutes now. Go ahead whenever you're ready. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council, and thank you for welcoming our delegation here today. My name is Karen St. Pierre, and this is my friend, Sandy McCrur. We have a brief presentation for you today, including some technical details about our request, followed by a slideshow. We represent a local community group called the Friends of the Bird Street Beaver Ponds. Our group's mission is to advocate and care for the health of the ponds, which includes protecting the various species of wildlife, such as beavers and western painted turtles that live there. We have an active steering committee composed of volunteers who have been working hard to raise awareness of the environmental, social, and recreational value of the ponds and surrounding ecosystems. To date, we have done so through a petition, articles in the local newspaper, a town hall style meeting, and a wildlife talk at Shars Landing. Our petition calling for the protection of the ponds has so far garnered close to 1,300 signatures. We're very concerned that the City of Port Alberni does not currently have specific regulations to adequately protect riparian areas such as the Bird Street ponds. The Government of British Columbia's Riparian Areas Protection Regulation, RAPR, was enacted to protect riparian areas while facilitating urban development that embraces high standards of environmental stewardship. According to the government website, the RAPR calls on local governments to protect riparian areas during residential, commercial, and industrial development by ensuring that a qualified environmental professional conducts a science-based assessment of proposed activities. Unfortunately, at this time, the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District is not included in the list of regional districts where the Riparian Protection Regulation applies. In 2008, the District of Tofino passed a bylaw, District of Tofino Riparian Development Permit Area OCP Amendment Bylaw number 1080, the purpose of which is to protect and preserve the natural features and function of riparian areas from the impact of residential, commercial, and industrial development. And we've included a copy of that bylaw in our supporting documents. We believe that the City of Port Alberni should follow Tofino's lead and adopt similar regulation for our area. We're very concerned about proposed developments in our community which do not meet the standards of protection set out in the RAPR. In particular, we are worried that the proposed Pacific Mayfair Estates development will have a very detrimental impact on the beaver ponds and the surrounding ecosystems. For these reasons, we urge the Council for the City of Port Alberni to 1. Adopt the full requirements of the BC Riparian Areas Protection Regulation by enacting a bylaw with the strength of Tofino's Riparian Development Permit Area OCP Amendment Bylaw number 1080. 2. Include the bylaw in the official community plan. And 3. Place a hold on all developments that impact riparian areas until the new OCP, including this bylaw, has been adopted. Both residents and visitors to Port Alberni deeply appreciate the natural beauty of our area. Many find the ponds and the trails to be a place of refuge, contemplation, and wonder. During the challenging past few years, the ponds have become, for many people, a place of calm and solace. Caregivers and patients from the nearby hospital, for example, regularly come to the ponds. Perched at the edge of the lower pond, a donated bench of beautiful wood and wrought iron bears the inscription, "Enjoy the view." Let's keep our views, our places of peace, our places of refuge, and our wilderness. The Bird Street Beaver Ponds and the surrounding forested areas are community jewels. City Council has an opportunity to enact bylaws which will protect these beautiful places and ensure they exist for future generations to enjoy. Thank you for allowing us to speak to Council today. We look forward to working with you on this important community matter in the future. And now Sandy has prepared a few slides highlighting the beauty of the ponds and their resident wildlife.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council. Oh, there's a button. Oh, that's good. Yes. Now, I just wanted to outline the drainage area in the ponds, and if you look at the screens, you can see what I'm talking about. First of all, there's Wolf Creek, and it drains into Roger Creek, which drains into the Somas River and then on into the inlet. They contain coho, and as far as I know, there are no blockages to passage for the coho all the way up to the boundary, up to including the boundary. And I know I took the local provincial biologist out, and he had a look. I think there's a path that goes from the end of the street right here to across the pond, and there's a bridge. He took a look at that and said this is a suitable coho habitat. So there are coho there. Not only that, well, that's good enough for the for Wolf Creek. The lower pond has dead trees, which are nesting habitat for wood ducks and hooded mergansers. There's a invasive yellow flag display that goes all the way around the lower pond. It's great. It's beautiful, really, in May, but it's very invasive, and it's actually beginning to invade the upper pond too. So it also provides habitat in the winter for ducks. And there are 3 existing beaver dams in the area. One is just below the log train trail. That's that line that you see through there. And then there's one just above the log train trail. And then finally, there's a beaver dam right there, which keeps the maintains the water level in the upper pond. Now, the upper pond is a little bit different. It's where the western painted turtles refuge is. The yellow flag is beginning to invade. There's winter duck habitat as well. There's bullfrogs there. Overall, it's more pristine than the lower pond. Now, what you see right here, this dashed line that goes around, that is where I can figure is the divide, the watershed divide. So all the water from approximately that boundary drains into Wolf Creek and on into the inlet. That area impacts the riparian area of the ponds. I also wanted to point out for Georgina Sears' benefit that there is a green line that goes around the edge of the pond right here. Now that green line isn't looking very green right now, but it is there, so it denotes park. So that not only is there a buffer along the boundary between Georgina's property and the rest of the other property, there's a buffer as well. It's undefined in the OCP, but it's there as well. And really, that's about all I have to say. There are some pictures here. You can see what the upper pond is wilder, the lower pond is tamer. The western painted turtles are threatened under the COSWIC status. COSWIC is the Committee for the Status of Wildlife in Canada. There you go. Now, the core population of western painted turtles is in the Alberni Valley. There's a lot out at the wetlands around the end of the Alberni Valley, the north end. The current population on Vancouver Island is about 250, but there are 2 that I have seen on the upper pond. And this is the dam that maintains the level on the upper pond, right there. Now, there used to be beaver lodges. They've either collapsed or been taken away. over the last year, but there's still one remaining, but I think it's for the bachelor beaver that is there. Is that enough? Okay, well, I'm almost done. Patients and staff from the, well, we've talked about this. There's the bench, there's the hospital. Again, northern red-legged frogs are also present in the creek below the ponds, and they have a status of special concern. And winter ducks, there's lots of pond ducks, insects and things that the ducks depend on, and so they have to be healthy. And that's all. So, if there's any questions, Karen and I are here.
Thank you very much. I know that I have, provided update before, but just wanted to reiterate again that council has not received this application. And we do understand there's changes being made to it, and I'll just call up Scott Smith, our Director of Development Services, just to provide any further update if we have it, or again, just an opportunity to talk about what the process will be when we get to that point.
Most certainly, Madam Mayor and Council and members of the public. So the owner's consultant team is continuing to work on a revised development application. The city has not formally received that revised plan yet. The owner has engaged a QEP biologist to help inform that revised plan, and the city will require a report from that biologist when that revised plan is submitted with that. So about how they're dealing with many of the items that the people have discussed here today. Once a formal revised application is received by the city, there will be an extensive review process. We will refer it to multiple internal and external agencies, and there will be an extensive public process will be undertaken. And I guess on just one of the comments in regards to on the riparian area regulations, yes, the province, not the city, the province chose to put those regulations only within certain portions of the province, not completely within the province. The city does intend, as part of our official community plan review process that is underway, that we would include some significant new environmental policies for the community and council to consider.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering, so, around the Adopt Early, the BC Riparian Areas Regulation request from the group to make sure that if an application came in today, it would be held to that standard. Are you able to speak to the standard that we do hold our applicants to versus what that would hold them? Like, is there a difference there?
So, again, I do want to indicate that they have, the company has, or the owner has engaged a qualified environmental, a biologist to look at this. They look at those types of things. And just because the riparian area regulations aren't directly applicable to this province, doesn't mean that we can't apply provincial legislation, such as the Water Act, and a variety of those things to ensure that, and we do have the ability to require that information as part of a development proposal, and we will ensure that it's reviewed, and we'll look at that very carefully. And certainly, and so I guess I can't say exactly what that is going to say yet, but we will certainly look at that, how that riparian area regulations would normally be applied, what they're proposing to do, what they've considered, and we'll be asking them to consider all those various pieces of environmental legislation, as well as good land use planning practice when this is being reviewed.
Thank you. And final question from me, and then council may have some as well. If we wanted to ensure that we were holding this development or any other to that riparian area standard, what would be the process for that in lieu of having our policy and OCP in place and adopted? In the meantime, would council just say we want to ensure that we pass a motion specific to this development to make sure it meets that standard in our review?
I think it would be, in my opinion, without seeing exactly what what they might be coming forward, or any other application. Like, we do have language in our official community plans that allows the city to require environmental reports where we feel there may be an impact. So I guess I don't know the details enough of the riparian area regulations to know exactly what they might be proposing, but will we take a very strong look at that? And may we independently hire a biologist to review their material? We absolutely could do that to ensure that it does, right? And I certainly believe, there will be lots of interest in this, so there'll be a lot of review of that material.
Thank you. Questions from council? Councillor Haggard.
No questions today, but I'd just like to make a comment to the delegation. Karen, I don't know you, but I do know Sandy, and I know Sandy's extremely passionate about this, and we really appreciate your passion in bringing it forward today. But my preference is to not pass a bylaw today. My preference is to wait till it comes out on our new official community plan and then pass it at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would just encourage everyone who is here to hang around. Of course, the next item on our agenda is the official community plan, kind of update on where we're at. This process is coming forward and moving forward quickly. So it's not a matter of 6 months out we'll get back to the OCP. It's regularly on our agendas right now. And Sandy, I saw that you had your hand up with a comment. We don't normally go to comments, but since you are the delegation, if you wanted to come back forward and just provide a final closing comment.
I didn't really hear much of a response to the what we were asking for to include the riparian protection in the OCP, other than what Scott said.
I think Scott's response was it's kind of a given that we're going to be bringing forward policy and that we'll follow the process on exactly what that's going to look like. There may be better policy, different policy that's more appropriate to our area, or it might end up being just that. Scott?
As part of any modernize or a review of a complete official community plan, you're always looking to update things. So we had intended, even prior to this application, to be looking at essentially environmental and aquatic development permit area guidelines and regulations, and much stronger environmental policies to be proposed in the OCP that will, of course, come out to the community for their input and review to see what it says and to be able to give their thoughts and input to both staff and council as part of adopting those types of new policies. There'll be other policies, like climate action policies are now required to be in the OCP, where they weren't previously when our one was done. So there will be a lot of those things that we had fully intended to do regardless of this application, and still intend to move forward with.
Thank you. I would just add, it wouldn't be good practice for council to just arbitrarily decide today that that is the right approach in the OCP. We have to go through the process, but as Scott's indicated, this is a normal part of the process now, and we will be going through that, and all of you, I'm sure, will be engaged in that process as we move forward. Thank you, Sandy and Karen. Before we move on to unfinished business, I did just want to take a moment to recognize Brian McLaughlin, our planner, who wasn't at our last meeting. But at our last meeting, we had a piece of correspondence indicating that the city received an award from, I think it was the Planners Institute of British Columbia, for work that was done on the Uptown Revitalization Study. And Plan, and Brian, we know that you really led that process and put a huge amount of work into it. So just wanted to appreciate all the work that you put in here today. So thank you. And we'll move on to unfinished business, and item number 1, Committee of the Whole meeting July 25th, 2022, and that was our official community plan update. Would someone like to come forward and give an update?
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council. Rising out of our Committee of the Whole, we had a discussion about where we're at with the update for the OCP Vision and Touchstone portion of the OCP. So before you today is a recommendation to move forward with an engagement strategy dated July 12th in response to the revisions that were made by, or were suggested and recommended by the committee in regards to number 3 and number 4 and number 7 of the touchstones. And the idea would be today that with council's consideration, we would move forward now with an engagement and consultation process with the community at large in regards to the vision and the touchstones, and report back to council after we gather various inputs through pop-ups, surveys, reaching out on Let's Connect and other tools, and are looking very much forward to bring this forward to the community and reporting back to council.
Thank you very much. And could you just comment on what the best way for people and community groups to stay engaged in the OCP process is and not miss anything?
Yes, I would highly recommend staying in touch with Let's Connect. There'll be an update to the tile that's on Let's Connect for the OCP. There'll be ways and updates in there as far as communicating with the public as well. We will be advertising in the paper for certain events as they come forward. And feel free any time to contact me directly. I'm open to any suggestions and communication with that. So they can contact the Development Services and ask for myself, Marianne Wade, and I'm happy to participate. And we're open to reaching out to stakeholders and engaging in any just chats, coffee. So anybody would like to chat with us, please reach out.
Wonderful, thank you. And for anyone who's not familiar with Let's Connect, it's a website, and I think it's letsconnectpa.ca.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, council, any questions or comments? Okay, Councillor Solda, do you want to read the motion?
Okay, Madam Mayor.
Oh, yep.
Madam Mayor, I move that the council accept the revisions of touchstones number 4 and 7 and the timeline graph as presented in the staff report dated July 14th, 2022, and approve staff proceeding with seeking community feedback on the draft official community plan, vision, and touchstones as amended.
Second.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Poon. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
And Madam Mayor, I move that council further revise OCP touchstones responsible infrastructure management number 3 to include the words adaptation and mitigation.
Second.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Poon. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried.
Oh, nice music. Madam Mayor, I move that council direct staff to implement the engagement and the communications strategy for the official community plan, vision, and guiding principles prepared by Frank Planning Collaborative and dated July 12th, 2022.
Second.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Poon. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to staff reports. Item number 1 is accounts. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the certification of the Director of Finance dated August 8, 2022 be received and checks numbering 150875 to 151026 inclusive, and payments of accounts totaling $4,395,205.80 be approved. And when I get a seconder, the Director of
Seconded by
Finance will be
Councillor
happy to
Solda.
explain that.
Thank you,
Go
Madam Mayor and
ahead.
Council. So obviously with the one meeting in July, that's a double up essentially in our normal payables. But with that, we also had the amounts that we send off to other governments. So approximately $2.5 million of that goes to the ACRD, the Regional Hospital District, and BC Assessment for the annual taxes that we collect. So.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 2. We have the RCMP Department report. Welcome, Inspector Rochette.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, Council. Just running out of space. So today I'm going to go over the crime report for April, May, and June of 2022. I'm going to make some comments afterwards, and then I'll open the floor for to answer any questions. So we received, for the 3-month period, received 3,490 calls for service. 2,857 of these calls were related to the city of Port Alberni. The number of criminal offenses are up by 18% if you compare the same quarter last year. Property offenses are up by 16%, as well as violent offenses are up by 14% compared to the same quarter last year. We've seen a significant reduction in number of domestic violence reports, which is down by 24% compared to the same quarter last year. We're going to break down a little bit here the stats in relation to, like I mentioned, total calls for service, 2,857, which is slightly less than last year, same quarter. Violent crime, we did go up from 139 to 158. Property crime, seen an increase from 377 to 439. Criminal code, 227 to 299. We've seen a reduction in drug offenses from 19 to 11. And the total criminal code, as mentioned earlier, has seen an increase from 762 to 899. Criminal traffic, which is impaired driving under the criminal code, or driving while prohibited under the criminal code, we've just gone down slightly from 31 to 30 cases during the second quarter of this year. Violent crime, if you break it down a bit further, we've seen a slight increase in assaults from 75 to 79. Assault with a weapon and bodily harm, 12 to 13. Slight reduction when you look at harassment. And the main files related to harassment, it's harassment online from 16 to 11. Robbery have gone down from 5 to 3. We've seen an increase in sex offenses from 8 to 15. Uttering threats, a slight increase from 34 to 44. Like I mentioned earlier, reduction in domestic violence from 41 to 31. So out of those 79 assaults reported earlier, 31 of them were related to domestic violence, which basically is just slightly less than half. Now we're going to break down a little bit more further for property crime. Auto theft, we've seen a slight reduction from 16 to 13. Bike theft, 11 to 7. Break and enter, we've seen an increase related to break and enter to businesses from 7 to 15. Break and enter for residences, slight decrease from 9 to 8. And status quo for break and enter other from 4 to 4. Mischief to property, which is vandalism, slight increase from 112 to 120. Theft has remained the same, basically from 86 to 87. Possession of stolen property, 7 to 3. Seen a slight increase in shoplifting from 34 to 42. Significant reduction for theft from vehicles from 58 to 29, as well as reporting fraud from 30 to 22. Other criminal code offenses, we've seen an increase in cause disturbance from 88 to 128. Breach of probation has remained basically the same from 14 to 15. And we've seen a reduction of breach of bail. So just another statistic that was provided to me from the crime analyst out of district. We've seen a decrease of 13% of mental health occurrences compared to the same quarter last year. So we went from 260 calls for service to 229. And I know it's been mentioned in the past, the impact sometimes of a small group that come to town or local that create a lot of issues. I have two examples, and I think they kind of display what I've mentioned in the past, that a small group cause a lot of issues. Maybe 10% may cause like 60 to 70% of the calls for service received. I won't provide any names, but I have two examples. They're open. There's one person there over 2 days of causing issues within Port Alberni. We were able to locate that person, and this occurred in June, and that person was arrested and is currently facing 14 charges and has been in custody ever since. So we can imagine one person causing, and when I'm looking at the charges, some are significant charges of assault with weapon, possession of weapon, flight from police, so significant charges. The second example is a gentleman that was involved in a few incidents in April, was arrested. We charged him with 6 counts of criminal charges, remained in custody for a few weeks, then was released, and again was involved in an incident in late June and was arrested again, and now is currently facing 14 more charges. So we're looking at 2 individuals here that, if we add all the charges, is 30 charges. So like has been mentioned in the past, we've seen an increase in some criminal offenses, but a lot of time it's related to a small group of people that we're getting a lot of support, and I've mentioned it before, that people get to remain in custody. We've seen more and more of that happening, and if they get released, if they're not local, I've seen on a regular basis, they get no-go to Port Alberni, so not to attend the region if they don't live here, and there's no reason for them to be here. So we've received a great support from Crown Council as well as the court system in regards to that. I'm opening the floor for if you have any questions, any comments.
Thank you. Councillor Solda and then Councillor Corbeil.
Inspector, thank you for your report. I do have a couple of questions. There's a lot of shoplifting in the Alberni Valley, as well as property being stolen and stuff like that. And a lot of people capture it on camera, but I'm reading that they're really frustrated, and I'm hearing from them that they're frustrated because there's nothing RCMP can do. And what's your advice to them? Like, how can we help mitigate that problem? You know, if you're capturing them on camera and they have the video footage, what happens? Can you just tell me the process so I understand that?
Yeah, so obviously if you have CCTV and you did capture the suspect, obviously you call us. The biggest issue is the quality. Sometimes you can't really see, it's not close enough, it's not clear enough. The other aspect is sometimes it's quite clear, but we just cannot identify the person if they're not local. So what we do if we can't identify them locally, we do send emails across the division or across the province to see if someone is able to identify someone. The issues that we've experienced in the past is you get reply back from officers or even the public, the person that committed this offense is person A, and then someone else says, no, it's person B. So now there's conflicting reports, and obviously in court, you have a fair disclosure. So for us to, when we approach Crown Council, we have to disclose that the person has been identified as a different person from 2 different individuals. So that causes issues, obviously, and then there's a reasonable doubt, and we can't move forward with charges. But I always encourage, if you have any CCTV evidence, provide it to us, and we'll look at them, and we can move forward from there. If there's any concerns that the public doesn't hear anything back, or they want to know exactly what should be required, they're more than welcome to contact the detachment, and we can discuss that with them.
Okay, and thank you. I know there's a lot of sharing back and forth on social media. The other one is the people that are committing these crimes and that, are they local Port Albernians, or you had alluded to that some are from out of town, but our percentage, is it mainly local people?
Well, the 2 examples I provided, they weren't local, so it doesn't mean that obviously we have issues with local residents as well. But I think I would say it's probably 50-50 as far as like issues if someone's local or not. Obviously, if it's someone from, like I mentioned earlier, if they're from outside the region, it makes it way easier now that we can show that there's no support, local support. They don't reside here, they don't live here, and when they obviously Crown's comfortable enough to go ahead with charges, and like I mentioned, we've had great support from judges in regards of releasing individuals and with no go to the region.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Corbeil, and then Councillors Haggard and Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Rochette, for your report. I'm sure you've seen the story in The Colonist, I think it was last week, that talked about the 2021 Crime Severity Index, and we were quite high with the exception of Prince George. The selected communities, we were the second highest. What exactly do they mean by the Crime Severity Index?
So, the Crime Severity Index, basically it starts with every crime is provided a number, like a value. So, as an example, an assault, you get a 20 value. But if you have a murder, homicide, you get 7,000 points. So what happens is you just need a few incidents, the major incidents, and then they calculate all the numbers, they add up all the numbers, and then subdivide by the population. So that's the difference between that, this Crime Severity Index, and a crime rate. With a crime rate, just calculate how many criminal code offenses you've received or complaints you've investigated. So you investigate a shoplifting or homicide, under the crime rates, considered the same. With the Crime Severity Index, that's what happened. And the quotation, the scoring for every offenses is updated every 5 years, and it's in correlation with sentencing in regards of the crime committed. So if they look back and they look at assault with a weapon, they see an increase in jail sentencing from 5 to 7 years. Then they increase the scoring, and they do that every 5 years. So when you look at Crime Severity Index, for a community like Port Alberni, you need just a few really major incidents, and it screwed the numbers, and that's when you see a significant increase. But on the other side, the next year can be a significant decrease. And what you do as well is they split non-violent crime and violent crime. And and obviously they do the average, and then that's when you see the scoring that you've seen in the media or on the internet.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Haggard and Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The one good statistic I see here is the decline in the numbers in domestic violence, which is good news. It's very similar to Q2 of 2020. So do you feel that the spike last year was maybe because we were under lockdown for quite a significant number of time, and so the numbers increased? Maybe
Absolutely.
that was just a blip?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and it's been across the island, if not across the country.
Okay.
And domestic violence as well as mental health occurrences. The numbers from 2020 and 2021 were up by 50% across the nation.
Wow.
So there's been it was a significant increase, obviously, related to partially to COVID and all the restrictions and the pressure put on society. And when I read the report from the crime analyst for this year, they've seen kind of a return to pre-COVID as far as the numbers, and they've seen a decrease in mental health occurrences as well as detaining individual under mental health crisis. They've seen a decrease, and we're expecting to see the same for the next quarter.
Great, thanks so much.
Councillor Washington and then Councillor Paulson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Inspector. My question is sort of similar to Councillor Solis, but with the increase in property crime investigations, my question was, is the same locals doing it, or are you finding new faces? Are you having confrontation with new faces in town?
We've had a few incidents with new faces, but I have to say that there's a lot of, we kind of follow, as far as, you see a decline when some of the well-known criminals get arrested and detained for several months, and then there's a bit of a decrease in the law, and then they get released. And obviously we're well aware of them, and we try to keep an eye on them, and our crime reduction unit has kind of been tasked with keeping in touch and making sure they comply with the conditions. But sometimes there's significant other pressures that we may have to reassign members. So, but that's what we've seen the last few months anyway.
Councillor Paulson.
Just, there's two categories. Once again, it rings a bell. The one is breaking into business, and it's over double, but it comes back to the 2019 level. I gather somebody or some individuals are back out of jail. Would that indicate an individual or certain individuals that are driving that stat? Breaking into business 7 to 15. And my second question is just maybe you could clarify what cause of disturbance is. We've gone from 88 to 128. just not sure what constitutes causes disturbance, so. Two questions.
In regards of breaking into a business, you're right. Like if you look at the numbers, we're kind of looking at numbers that are similar to pre-COVID, and we've received information of new individuals that are in town and trying to keep tab on the whereabouts and making sure we stay on top of that. It goes back to what was mentioned earlier about CCTV as well. We're trying to work with businesses and making sure that we get as much evidence as possible. We have a really exceptional ident team here, so forensic identification section team. So we have 3 members here that, you know, if there's an incident, we bring them in, and I know it's surprising what can be found as far as DNA is concerned, and I know there's a strong support now to look at DNA for property crimes, which was a bit in the back burner during COVID because of challenges related to some of the restrictions. So I'm expecting that we'll be able to have better success in regards of charging. And I should mention too, because I was looking at some statistics and it's related to 2021, but when you look at nonviolent crime provincially, usually a success rate for charges is only 18% as far as how many offenses and how many charges are laid. The local detachment area, we were at 27%. So we're well above the provincial average as far as the work done by the members that work here. And when you look at violent crime, provincially the average is 42%, and the detachment area we reached like just shy of 60% success rate. So I was quite pleased when I saw the numbers of a lot of members that work extremely hard to solve all the crime. For your second question in regards to cause disturbance, the issue is it's several incidents. So you look at intoxicated public, someone yelling. Sometimes it could be reported as an assault, but the officer gets there and it wasn't really enough for an assault, but it's just kind of a pushing, so it becomes a cause disturbance. So those are the type of incidents that we've seen a little bit. Obviously, the numbers show that, and there's more and more establishments that are open as well, and so we've seen an increase in that, of people being intoxicated and the yelling, the screaming. So that's the public report that, and for us, it scores as cause disturbance.
Thank you. Not seeing any other questions. Thank you for the report, and great work on the, I think, clearance rates, right? That's what they're called?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you. I know that Inspector Hunter previously reported on those as well, and it is very impressive to see the number of cases where you're finding the people who are doing it. And I know that we often hear from the public around property crime, and so these types of numbers are really helpful for us to have, to encourage them to keep calling if there is a problem, and that the RCMP obviously want to get those calls, and that frequently the cases are being solved. So great work, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 3 from the Director of Engineering and Public Works. We have the Old Wastewater Lagoon desludging.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tough act to follow right there. So exciting. And it does impact all of us. The report before Council is requesting award of a portion of the contract for sludge removal from the Old Lagoon. The work to remove the sludge from the Old Lagoon could not start until the new wastewater treatment facility is complete. Construction of the new wastewater treatment facility has been delayed due to the wet weather we've had up until June, as well as the ongoing labor and material shortages that we're seeing across quite a few industries. Therefore, the contract for decommissioning or desludging of the Old Lagoon has been delayed from starting in July to starting in late August and possibly early September, meaning the contract at this point cannot be completed this year. The total budget for the desludging was $450,000. The one proposal that we received was for $1,019,148 from American Process Group. The project, as we had set it up, as well as the contracts that we received, or this proposal we received from the contractors, for 2 actual separate parts of the project. The first part is literally going in with an excavator and taking out the dry materials, because you have to have it dry to a certain point to haul it, and so that the Alberni landfill will accept it. And that is far more cost effective doing it with an excavator and trucks than it is the second part of the contract, which is basically dewatering it using a centrifuge or some other methods, which can be 5 to 10 times the price. So the more you can pull out by excavator, the more money you can save. So due to this delay, we have to either negotiate a price with the contractor at this point or reissue a request for proposals. The benefit of negotiating with the contract in these two parts is being able to remove some sludge this summer with the cheap option using an excavator, and potentially early next summer again. So we potentially could remove twice as much, and that will be a cost savings to the contract. Our consulting engineer is recommending we award this less expensive portion of the contract and then negotiate the rest of the contract with the one proponent we've received. If negotiations are not satisfactory, then we do have the option to go back to a request for proposal for that second part at a later time. In summary for this report is we put out a call for proposals for removal of the sludge from the old lagoon. One proposal was received. The proposed price for the entire contract from them was $1,019,148. Staff and our consultant are recommending that council award a portion of the contract, phase one we'll call it, for a maximum value of $450,000 to American Process Group Limited, and to negotiate in good faith with the contractor to complete phase two of the work in 2023. Division of the contract is required in order to move forward with the work at the driest time of the year, which tends to be July and August. If there are any questions from council, I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Solda, and then Councillor Corbeil and Councillor Washington.
Just a quick question. The company you're suggesting, is it American? Or is it
I
just
do
the
believe
name?
their head office is in Tacoma, but they do have an office in Stony Plain, Alberta.
So are we paying Canadian or US?
Canadian.
Okay, because normally those companies become US. Okay, and the other one is nothing local, nothing on the island?
They are actually using the excavation portion, they will use a local company.
Oh, so they're going to be subcontracting?
Exactly.
Basically.
Exactly. So that first part of the contract is local contractors doing that part of the work.
My thoughts are, why are we getting a subcontractor? Why don't we just go to the subcontractor? I'm just kind of curious to know why we aren't going to this company since they're local.
In good faith, we put out a request for a proposal, and they have replied with, it's part of the negotiation with them. If we were to pull them out of that contract, we could be into some contractual issues with that. Because we've gone out in good faith and asked for prices. The local contractors did not provide us prices for this. So a firm out of Alberta has, and they're using a local contractor. If we cut them out of that, we could have liability, is what I'm trying to say.
I have issues with that, but okay, I understand too.
Councillor Corbeil.
Well, Rob, you might have answered my question then. I'm wondering if there's any sense of urgency for this project at all. And considering we only had one person respond, one company respond, and if you look down our agenda, we have a lot of expenses coming our way. Is there any way we could put this off for a year or longer? I don't see any reason why it would need to be done now.
We can. The two issues are, one, again, being able to do the cheaper option for 2 summers instead of one will save us money, flat out. It will be cheaper. Whatever our negotiated contract would be, or if we put out proposals again, it will be cheaper by being able to remove with an excavator. And secondary is frankly just the odor, because as this just sits there and we're not aerating it, the odor this summer and next summer will be a lot worse than it has been in the past.
Thank you. Councillor Washington, and then Councillor Poon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question's been answered twice, but I guess what I'm really, it's the same thing with the contractor from Alberta, that kind of bothered me a little bit. But what happens to the property after the process is all done? What do you intend to do with that?
We, at this time, the desludging is part of the decommissioning, which we have a legal obligation to do that, obviously, for environmental reasons. Then after that is the rehabilitation. And we have a plan monitoring committee from our liquid waste management plan and for this facility and our other liquid waste. And that committee will discuss in our meetings about what the options are for rehabilitation. And that committee does involve all of our partners in the region, the ACRD, Shashat, Hupachesit, and others as well, like the ministry and others, to talk about what our options are, what we can do from an environmental perspective, socially, economically. And so that engagement would happen over the next year. But again, we're in no rush to do the rehabilitation per se. As long as we do the decommissioning, then we can make sure the rehabilitation we do right and we represent the community.
Thank you. Councillor Poon.
Thank you. I may be a little confused here, but by by committing to the $450,000 portion, are we committing to the whole, the 1 million contract, or is that subject to change in price, or you know, you're saying that we can negotiate that further in the future?
Yes, and at this time, we're just committing to the $450,000, and we have no commitment to do any further work aside from outside of this contract having to finish the desludging at some point in the future. So
Okay.
we're only committing to $450,000.
And with the $450,000 contract, are they agreeing to a certain deliverable in terms of percentage of work completed, or?
It would be by cubic meter, basically. So we would
Okay.
negotiate separately. They have to mobilize, demobilize their equipment, so there's a cost to that, but then it's just per cubic meter.
Thank you.
Councillor Solda.
Sorry, I'm going to go back to my question at the beginning there. So if we have the contract, if we go ahead with this Plan A, let's go with Plan A, and the contractor comes in and has the subcontractor do whatever he needs to have done, does that mean, just to help me understand, because this is not my expertise, the second part, we would have to renegotiate to do a second part of, to re-go in there and get more sludge and stuff like that?
Exactly. So we can negotiate with this contractor to do the second part. And if those negotiations aren't satisfactory to us, then we can just go out to request for proposal again.
So we could get the subcontractor that's local to come in and, you know where I'm going with this, to make it less money.
Potentially, but the second part is quite technical with the centrifuge monitoring and making sure you have the right percentage of moisture content in the sludge so that the Alberni landfill will accept it. So I'm not aware of anyone on the island who does that. It's not saying there isn't somebody, but by us going through this first process, we can define better the actual amount of sludge there, and that may, if we go to proposal again, garner more interest.
Okay, so fair enough, but I would rather see part two to be out on contract, to go out for proposals. Maybe, like you said, there's somebody on the island, or maybe the local contractor has that technology and we aren't really familiar with. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. That's my feeling.
Thank you. Along similar lines, I was going to ask, so just for making sure that we're all aware, the local contractor and the excavating piece of it, we believe is just probably equipped to do the solids piece. So that part would be done through this contract. If we then move forward and negotiate for the second piece, which is more technical and we expect something that a local contractor wouldn't have the ability to do, but if we are not satisfied with that price moving forward, we can go back to tender for that portion. But expecting we likely will not end up with a local contractor and may end up with the same company anyways.
Agreed, and sorry for clarity for council, is today we're just asking to award that first part. So at a future date, after we've talked to this contractor, we will be back before council asking if we proceed with sending out a proposal, or whether council supports our negotiated price. So that we're not committing to that second part today.
Thank you. So I'll go to Councillor Paulson in a moment, but I want to just speak in support of moving forward with this. I think the potential to do the part that we know is the cheaper process with the excavator over the course of 2 years, and hopefully remove more through that process and less through the expensive method, if I could very much just simplify to our level of knowledge on this, I think certainly makes a lot of sense. It is unfortunate anytime that we don't get a local bidder and then a local company ends up subcontracting, but at the end of the day, we have to make sure we're following proper legal process to not get into trouble on tenders. And I think that it is important, especially because we're getting the benefit of being able to do this over the course of 2 dry seasons. I think it is important that we move forward. Anyone who has been recently, over the last couple of weeks, down to Victoria Key area will have noticed the smell, and it is worse than I've ever smelled it. So looking forward to getting back, or to getting rid of that, and I think the sooner we can do that, the better. Councillor Paulson.
Rob, maybe you could just make comment with regards to, and I know I'd love to have local contractors do this, but I gather that this particular type of process is heavily regulated, and there's probably only a finite number of companies that specialize in this kind of work. and would be qualified to do this kind of work. I wonder if you could maybe just comment on, I don't think there's thousands of companies across Canada that can do this. I would suspect there's only a finite number of companies that are actually licensed and properly equipped to do this kind of work. I could be wrong.
I would say the fact that we've only received one submission and it's from Alberta would exactly speak to that point.
Councillor Paulson, would you like to read the motion?
Caught me. You caught me. I'd like to move that council award a portion of the contract for the municipal wastewater lagoon desludging, RFP 007-22, project to American Process Group Canada Limited for a total amount not to exceed $450,000, including GST, with said works to include scraping of drier materials or skin off the top of the sludge and hauling off-site to the Alberni Valley landfill.
Thank you. And just to clarify, that was excluding GST.
Oh, I'm sorry.
As long as you're not changing the motion.
No, I had a little black line through there. So.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Poon. Any final comments on this? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. None opposed. And moving on to item number 4, Director of Finance, Financial Plan Amendments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So within today's agenda, there's a request for Council to consider amendments to the financial plan on 3 projects. One is the Child Care Centre located on 8th Avenue beside Roland Arts Centre. The second is the train station seismic upgrades. And the third is the 4th Avenue sleeping pod facility. So within the financial plan every year, we provide a contingency of $200,000. Within the recommendation today, there is a request to use that $200,000 for these projects, including $140,000 assigned to the 4th Avenue sleeping pod and $60,000 going to the train station. With that, there is still a shortfall for the Child Care Centre of $500,000. That is to provide the 88 new childcare spaces with a grant that we received from the province in the amount of $4.1 million. And based on the latest cost estimates, we're looking at an additional allocation that's required to proceed in the amount of $500,000. And with that, the funding would not be required until 2023 when this project is underway. And we're asking that we consider that addition into the 2023 plan. But of course, that has to be amended in the 2022, 2026 financial plan. Also with the train station, the costs that have been seen at that site with the inflationary costs of materials and some unexpected remediation that was required, requires the amount of $270,000 for that project. So the request is to use that contingency that's remaining from the $200,000 in the amount of $60,000, and then $210,000 next year in tax requisition. But in the meantime, if those funds are required, we could borrow those internally from the equipment replacement fund. And then if we do use those funds, any interest that we forego will have to be assigned back to that reserve. So Council has the option to consider these amendments to the 2022-2026 financial plan, the capital plan, or provide alternate directions. So with that, I hand it back to the Council.
Thank you. Questions from Council? Councillor Solda and then Councillor Corbeil.
So my question is on the equipment replacement fund, how much do we have in it right now? Approximately, if you
approximately about $6 million is sitting in the IRF right now. We do have some commitments that are still in flux, but the actual cash value that we have is around $6 million right now.
And that's the commitments you're referring to, that's including the commitments already in there, or is $6 million is total?
It's $6 million in cash that we have right now. We have RFPs and tenders that we're releasing shortly, but just with the timing and everything, we do have a significant amount of reserve funds sitting there that would take us into next year to allow us to proceed with the recommendation.
Okay. And just so the public knows, can you explain, okay, so if we borrow the money from the contingency fund or equipment replacement fund, how do we pay it back? Like, how do we, other than taxation from the, like, do we charge the renter or whoever's in there, or how do we pay it back into the funds?
Yes, so Madam Mayor, with the fundings that we have, it really depends on whether it's coming from water or sewer. Those come from the fees and tolls that we have for those services. We could have surplus, we could have rental income from different facilities. Let's say, if we do work at the Harbor Quay, there's rent coming in for those facilities down there. So it really depends on where we're borrowing it from and how we need to recover it. But for the most part, it is taxation that we see coming through the financial plan as far as our revenue resources.
So where I'm going with this, when I look at the roof, I know it has to be done. I do understand that. But when I look at the train station and the upgrades, that's not equipment, or is it equipment? So how do we give back that money because it's...
Okay. Madam Mayor, so I think I understand. Sorry about that, if I was unclear.
Sorry.
So with internal borrowing, we can do that as long as council agrees to that and makes that amendment in the financial plan. It's our own funds, but we do have these funds for specific purposes. So if it is for the equipment replacement, that has to stay whole, and it's for the items that are in the earth, essentially. So if we borrow from that, we might lose 4% interest from that $210,000 that we have in the earth during the time that we borrow. But once we replace that, we have to replace the $210,000 plus any interest that we forego over that partial year.
Okay. People have just asked me that, so I just need it clarified. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think for clarity, Andrew's not suggesting that we take the funds from IRF long-term. He's suggesting that just that if we need them in the meantime, that we would borrow and then pay them back last year. Not that we actually use the IRF fund for that purpose. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Andrew, explain to me, so on page 2 of 5 in our agenda, it says add $500,000, increasing the project contingency budget. Now, that normally means it's money sitting there in case there's cost overruns, and of course, the way things are going, I assume there will be. But do we absolutely know for sure that that $500,000 is necessary today?
Based on the information that we have currently, Councillor Corbeil, that's what we expect to pay. There's some unknowns and there's some things that we have to work, but we're seeing the cost escalation of the materials, and labor essentially is going up too, beyond what we had in our original estimate earlier this year. So those are the factors that are increasing that, and working with our project management consultants, this is the recommendation that we brought forward, is that we require that $500,000. And we're trying to keep it as lean as possible, obviously, with that project. The intent was not to have city funds fund that project, but with cost escalation and the importance of this project, the recommendation is in front of council to proceed. We need that $500,000 of budgetary contingency. I mean, it'll be finalized in the end, but when we see construction complete, but we anticipate that we'll require that $500,000.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. On the childcare project, I just want to note, because members of the public often are not aware on this project, that we have received over $4.1 million in funding from the province for this project. And that funding would have gone out to communities, whether it came to our community or not. So I'm really thrilled that we have this funding. I know I hear from parents all the time who are looking at 2-year wait lists for trying to get their kids into childcare, are not able to return to the workforce because they cannot find childcare anywhere in the community. And then just, of course, the astronomical costs that people are paying. So Port Alberni used to really be exempt from this issue, and now we are not. We are just like everyone else. And 88 spaces is very significant. But the other thing I think that's important to note is the childcare funding coming into our community is not just the city's project. There's actually 192 spaces that were funded by the provincial government last year. So 3 projects in total are being funded and almost 200 childcare spaces. So this is really exciting. It's a great initiative of the provincial government and very fortunate that our community is benefiting so much from it. Will have a big impact on returning people to the workforce. And just hoping before we start reading these motions on the train station, maybe Tim, if you're able to provide an update. Everyone knows, I think, that we are, retrofitting the train station to be able to hold a tenant, and that we've recently conducted a search for expressions of interest for a new tenant in that space. Are you able to give an update now that that process is closed, when the public can expect to hear what the results were?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, we ran a request for proposals. We extended it because we were receiving interest, and because the project was still unfolding, the renovation project. We've received, that RFP is closed. We received 3 proposals, and a staff committee is examining those proposals right now. They'll come to council in camera for council's direction. Depending on that direction, we may begin to negotiate with one or more of those proponents. And as soon as that can be advanced and council reaches an agreement with a preferred tenant, that'll be announced publicly then.
Thank you. I think it's important to note because we are investing. I mean, we received, I think, $390,000 on this project, 310 maybe, something like that, from the provincial government on the train station as well. But we are investing with the expectation of seeing a return in terms of leasing the space out and then getting new vibrancy into the area. Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read these motions?
Thank you,
Sorry,
Madam Mayor.
One motion.
I would like to move that council direct that City of Port Alberni 2022-2026 Financial Plan Bylaw number 5045 2022 be amended as follows. A, add $500,000 in 2023 from general revenue taxation for the purpose of increasing the project contingency budget for the Child Care Center project. B, amend the overall budget for project 21024 Child Care Center project from $2,900,000 to $4,644,989 to reflect a $1,244,989 increase in grant funding, total grant funding $4,144,989. C, borrow $210,000 from the Equipment Replacement Reserve Fund, ERF, in 2022 for the purpose of completing Project 21020 train station seismic upgrades. D, transfer $60,000 in 2022 from line 29911 contingency funds for the purpose of completing Project 21020 train station seismic upgrade. E, amend the overall budget for the capital project 21020 train station seismic upgrades to $860,000. And F, assign $140,000 from line 29911 contingency funds for the purpose of funding the city's contribution to construction of the 4th Avenue Sleeping Pod facility.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Poon. And before I forget to ask, Tim, are you able to provide us with a rough number of the violation tickets that we are pursuing on the property adjacent to the 4th Avenue site?
Madam Mayor, at my last awareness, and that was some time ago now, likely 6 to 8 weeks, it was north of $120,000, and we continue to ticket the property owner for non-compliance.
Thank you. Okay, so moved and seconded. Are there any final comments? Councillor Paulson.
I wonder if the city manager might want to just comment on the city's commitment and commitment to that 4th Avenue Sleeping Pod facility, and kind of what we're not the only ones providing service there in what we are providing, and maybe some of the partners.
Tim?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Twyla, if you can bring up the 4th Avenue sleeping pod section, please. Sorry. No, that's fine. It's a good report, and thank you for giving us a chance to go through it. So the city's partnered with Port Alberni Friendship Center, New Channel Tribal Council, Hoopachesset First Nation, and Seshot First Nation, forming a task force to address unsafe housing conditions also on 4th Avenue. And Madam Mayor, you might want to speak to how powerful that task force is to be in the room with those folks. The task force has been developing a plan to create temporary housing on adjacent property that the city purchased recently, and we were successful, led by the Friendship Center, who acted on behalf of this task force. We were successful in accessing BC Housing funding to cover the operating costs for, I believe, 3 years. And Madam Mayor, you can speak better to that than I. The BC Housing will not fund capital costs associated with these kind of facilities. So the city and all the partners made commitments. The city committed early on, I believe it was $50,000 plus city servicing the site and providing the land on it for a nominal fee. Since those early days, as we're building out this project and identifying other components of the construction phase that are not covered by BC Housing funding, the list here shows city-owned land at a nominal lease fee, consideration of a temporary use permit or some other enabling process, provision of city services including water, sanitary, sewer, and storm, on-site preparation work to service the pods in an office building and washroom facilities, fencing the site to keep it secure, providing electrical service from BC Hydro, and providing and having installed security cameras and general oversight of the construction phase. I can tell you, Madam Mayor, that the site, I believe some work was being undertaken today on site, servicing the property, and over the next couple of weeks, you'll see the site being cleared and cleaned and prepared for construction.
Thank you. And I think I could probably talk about this project for days, so I won't. I will just say that you know, the site next door to where we're building the sleeping pods has been a concern for council and for the community for far too long. And our sleeping pod project has actually put us on a panel at UBCM this year coming up to talk about the partnership that we formed. And I think that we should all be very proud of the partnership that we formed. Because for years we, sat and tried to figure out how to address that one specific site, and we're not able to, with all the ticketing and everything else that we were trying to pursue solutions there, we were not able to make any progress. But last November, council directed that we send a letter to Seshot, Hoopachesset, New Channel Tribal Council, and the Friendship Center to ask them to join us in a task force to look for solutions for that property. And within a few months, we had $750,000 a year in operating funds for 3 years from BC Housing. And I think we've raised jointly within the group about $200,000 in capital funding as well to bring that project to fruition. And then, of course, the city has been public that we will be pursuing the $120,000+ in violation tickets for the property next door, and that could as well be applied to some of these costs when that comes to fruition. So I think this is a great project. Very thankful that the Friendship Center has taken the lead for us. While we as a city, have a role in enforcement and we have a role in the planning aspect, we are not housing providers and we are not intending to be housing providers. So very grateful that the Friendship Center has decided to take this on because they know how to run a project like this, and they will be the agency contracted. So we are very much just acting as a facilitator to get from where we're at today to that site being built out and tenants being moved from one site to the other. And lastly, I will just say that I had lunch with Minister David Eby over the weekend, and he is the current Minister of Housing, and he was really impressed by this project and the partnership that we had brought together. And so I think this is a great example of how much we're able to achieve when we bring together the right partners. And all 4 of those partners have been just great advocates, and now we have something that is real, and hopefully we will be shutting down one site and moving people into a much safer way of living and having somewhere to sleep at night going forward. Any other information you want, Councillor Paulson?
That was very, very good.
Thank you. Okay, so the motion is moved and seconded. Seeing no other comments, all in favor? Carried, thank you. On to bylaws. Item number 1 from the development planner, proposed zoning bylaw amendments 5450 Greenard Street.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council. Today before you is consideration of third reading of the proposed bylaws that were considered by Council on June 13th at your Council meeting, where you gave first and second reading to the proposed bylaws and a resolution to waive the public hearing because the proposed project aligns with our OCP land use designation. So under the Local Government Act, Section 467, you have the ability to waive the public hearing. Notice was given, and we received no correspondence, so staff is recommending moving forward with the third reading of the proposed bylaw. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Corbeil.
I do have one, and I'm totally in favor of this project, but it's small lot, single family. And if I understand this correctly, the minimum lot size is 3,767 square feet. A house can be 50% of that, so that's 1,883 square feet, and it could have 2 levels. To me, that doesn't seem like a small house. Should we, and I don't even know if we're able to change this, but could we change it so we're gearing to, you know, many people in my sort of age group are looking for patio homes. They're not looking for 3,600 square foot homes. So can this be changed to reflect that? I think that's the need going forward for this community in a lot of cases.
So, Councillor Corbeil, thank you for those comments. Those are definitely housing needs that we are looking for in an update to the OCP Housing Action Plan and updates to the zoning bylaw. We will have to consider this a smaller lot version that would give more of a patio home and other designs. At this point, we need to actually work through the ramifications of that zoning and how it will play out in the community with the OCP Housing Action Plan and the zoning bylaw update. So definitely on our radar. With this one, this does allow us to actually create more smaller lots under our R3 zoning to create more housing that otherwise you'd only have 2 versus now you got 5. So it does create some increase in the housing and actually is a smaller lot than what you would do with an R1. So it's moving in the right direction. Is it perfect? There's things that we can look at as we move forward, absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read that motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to move that zoning map amendment number 5450 Grenard Street, Hopkins, bylaw number 5056 be read a third time.
Second.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Corbeil, seconded by Councillor Poon. Seeing no additional comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And we've got item number 2 from the development planner, proposed zoning bylaw amendment 4925 Leslie Avenue.
That's great. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Similar to the last set of bylaws you considered, this one at 4925 Leslie Avenue is similarly to rezone the property from R1 single family residential to R3 small lot single family residential. At Council's June 13th meeting, they gave first and second reading to the bylaws, as well as passed a resolution to waive the public hearing. Staff followed up by issuing all the required statutory notices. We put ads in the paper, mailed out letters telling people they could send us feedback. The city did not receive any correspondence in response to the waiving of the public hearing or the application. And so the application is here for third reading. I can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councillor Poon, would you like to read this motion?
Yes, I'll move that zoning map amendment number 53, 4925 Leslie Avenue, Needham, bylaw number 5059 be read a third time.
Second.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Kuhn, seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And on to item number 3 from the Development Planner, proposed OCP and zoning bylaw amendments for 4835 and 4825 Bird Street and 3618 and 3614 Fifth Avenue.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this application at the corner of Bird Street and Fifth Avenue was for OCP and zoning bylaw amendments to facilitate the construction of 2 multifamily buildings for a total of 40 dwelling units. The application is before council for final reading, and there's a bit of a delay between third reading and final because council had set 2 conditions for them to complete before you consider the bylaws again. They have since completed those conditions. They consolidated the lots on either side of the laneway, and they provided an estimate for off-site works to the satisfaction of the Director of Engineering. So the application is here for council today, and if you have any questions, please ask.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, I'm happy to see this project moving forward. It is, it's a good investment in that area for sure. Councillor Washington, would you like to read the motions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the official community plan amendment number 36, Fifth Avenue and Verge Street, Serenado, bylaw number 5042, now be finally adopted, signed by the mayor and corporate officer, and numbered 5042.
Second.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried.
And I move that the zoning text amendment number T30, CD3, comprehensive development, multifamily residential infill, Fifth Avenue and Birch Street, bylaw number 5043, be now finally adopted, signed by the mayor and corporate officer, and numbered 5043.
Seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Opposed? None opposed.
And that zoning map amendment number 47, Fifth Avenue and Birch Street, I'm sorry about the name, Carniato, bylaw number 5044, be now finally adopted, signed by the mayor and corporate officer, and numbered 5044.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. None opposed. Thank you. And correspondence for action. Item number 1, we have Pink Buffalo Films requesting permission to film at Johnson Road and Victoria Quay in relation to the Topaz Cable Landing Project. The city's filming on location in Port Alberni. Policy dated December 13th, 1999 is attached for reference. Are there any questions or comments on this one, other than that maybe we need to update that 1999 policy? Seeing none, Councillor Haggard, would you like to read the motion?
I'd like to move that council authorize Pink Buffalo Films in accordance with the city's filming on location policy to film at Johnson Road and Victoria Quay in relation to the Topaz Cable Landing Project on August 9th, 2022.
Second.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Poon. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And item number 2 is an email received August 2nd, 2022 from David Weewichar on behalf of the Port Alberni Toy Run Association requesting council's support of the Toy Run activities and to proclaim the week of September 12th to 18th, 2022 as Toy Run Week in Port Alberni. Any questions? None. Councillor Paulson, would you like to read this?
I'd like to move that council support the Port Alberni Toy Run Association's activities taking place on September 17 and 18, 2022, subject to notification of emergency services and BC Transit, provision of standard liability insurance in the amount of $5 million, receipt of special event permit from the LCRB, Liquor Control Board, Liquor and Cannabis, okay, thanks. And further, the council proclaim the week of September 12th to 18, 2022 as Toy Run Week in Port Alberni.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And proclamations, we have a letter dated July 14th, 2022 from Port Alberni Community Action Team requesting a proclamation to proclaim International Overdose Awareness Day on August 31st. Councillor Haggard, would you like to read this one?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that Council proclaim August 31st, 2022 as International Overdose Awareness Day in the city of Port Alberni.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Solda, and I just wanted to recognize Councillor Haggard as the city's representative on the Community Action Team and for all of the work that she is doing there. On the motion to proclaim the day, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And correspondence for information. Bylaw.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we have 5 pieces of correspondence for Council's information. One from the Alberni Valley Lions Club, and it's an invitation to Mayor and Council to attend their derby, their annual derby, taking place on Saturday, August 20th. We have communications from UBCM, which is informing Council of the first of 2 payments that the city will receive, former name of the gas tax fund. We have 2 communications from Miss Rebecca Terapaki, one regarding the 3rd Avenue Bread of Life and the TUP, and another regards advertising of cannabis throughout the city. Thank you card from the 2022 grad class and prom committee, extending their appreciation to council for permitting the use of city streets for their parade, and a communication from Leslie Fox in support of the Friends of the Bird Street Pond.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on the correspondence? Councillor Corbeil.
Just one thing, and I can't find it right now, but in the letters from Mrs. Terapaki, there was something from the provincial government, and it talked about the cannabis facilities and the advertising and the distances from one another. And when I reread it, it said something like they should. There wasn't a must or have to, it was should. So I'm assuming that that wasn't binding the advertising and the distance from one another. Am I correct in that assumption?
Sorry, I'd have to refer that question to our director.
I think that's a question for Scott.
Entitlement Services.
Yeah, it wasn't legally binding, and yeah, it was 2018, so that is that letter from the it's a bit dated, and as we know, cannabis regulations have changed substantially over the last number of years. We do have a signed bylaw. Our cannabis retail are treated like other retail businesses. They are legal businesses, and so the signage requirements that they have is similar to other signage requirements.
Thank you. Okay. Seeing no, Councillor Haggard.
There is a request from the Lions Club for volunteers from council to help support the Bullhead Derby. And I believe the last time this event happened, Councillor Polson and I measured bullheads, and Councillor Polson, being the manly man that he is, made me handle all the bullheads because he doesn't like to touch them.
Just saying.
So I was...
requesting a different partner.
Yes.
I will be away, so.
Okay.
You're out.
I'm working that day.
Yeah.
So is there anybody that would like to measure bullheads with me? Because I'd be happy to do it.
So you're committed. I think I'll be there as well, but I'll give you that job.
You're on measuring tape.
I'm an expert now.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on. There's no report from in camera. Are there any items that councillors would like to highlight for council reports? Councillor Corbeil, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to mention on behalf of the mayor and the city council, I attended the unveiling of the new logo for the forestry company in TFL 44, the Swatkin company. It's a stylized logo with it's a First Nations bear on top with fish on the side and a tree in the middle, which I guess is to emphasize how, you know, the forest and the animals are all one. And I actually got to speak at it, which was nice, and it really gave me a feeling of, you know, there's a chance that we can start to turn this forest industry around. No doubt that the First Nations will be managing for all the values, and they I believe want to create local employment, which we have seen far too much of that leave the valley in the last number of years. So it was really a good feeling, and you know, I think some good things are in our future as far as the forest industry goes, and the Huayet First Nation and the Swakan Forestry Company. So it was a good day. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. Okay, Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Two things. I forgot to put the trail running event in my report. It was held on June 23rd, and it was a huge success. What happened was Port Alberni was on the organizers' radar, but not this year. And another community had to cancel last minute because their trail, part of their trail was not available because they were doing a development. So we thought, why not Port Alberni? And it was a very well-organized event that came together very quickly. A lot of people attended and participated, and I heard afterwards that he had nothing but great things to say about the community. So I think we're going to be, it's going to be a regular event held every year now, so that's great news. They bring a lot of people to, that bring in a lot of money to the community. Hotels were full, restaurants were full, breweries were full, so it was a great, thank you. And the next thing I want to talk about is the event that the Community Action Team is hosting to recognize International Overdose Awareness Day. The theme for the event is solutions that are unique to Port Alberni around the drug crisis. It will be held on August 31st at the Trinity Anglican and Lutheran Church from 7 to 9 p.m. Our Mayor, our MP Gordon Johns, and MLA Josie Osborne will speak at the event. And I just want to invite all members of the public to attend this event. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Paulson.
I'm going to put another councillor on the spot here, but Councillor Washington, I wonder if you might be able to give us some clarity on the Salmonary weekend. And there is no Salmon Festival, I understand, as we know it, but what's your best take on what's happening this year?
Well, this year it'll strictly be a derby. The Salmon Festival Society, after the 48th annual in 2019, unfortunately lost the Kiwanis Club, which was sort of the backbone of the society. And a lot of, we had people passing away and people retiring and moving out of town. So we've had a meeting or two here to try and rejuvenate the festival end of it, and I've had very little success in doing so. Some people, you know, they've gone on to other things because they've had this 2-year hiatus. They, you know, a lot of people had that in their blood. Like my children did not know, like they had to go to Salmon Festival and then they can go to school. Yeah. And unfortunate story there is one year we were hosted by Pacific Draft Beer. My son got up in the morning and go, oh, there's a brand new shirt here. So we put on the shirt and walked down to John Howitt and promptly got turned around home for work. But no, we're gonna hang on. We're gonna try. I want to try and get it going maybe next year once all the smoke clears. Start a little earlier, but it's just people hummed and hawed, and then we got into June, then we got into July, and it was unfortunate that things like fish and security and all that kind of stuff can't be secured. We were very fortunate in the old days to be able to hire a ball team for $400 to do security, and now you got to hire professional security people, professional traffic control, and all that comes with a huge cost. But no, I'm not giving up on it. I want to try and get it going again, but it's just unfortunate this year that we're fortunate that Carolyn Jaskins and their Thai club have they battled the two COVID seasons, and they want to continue. And ironically, that's where it all started, anyways, with the Thai club back in. I think the Salmon Festival got involved about 1972. So, but no, I haven't given up on my gang. It's just we got to really regroup and start very early, and get all the volunteers in line, and hopefully we can do something next year.
Well, I just want to thank you, Councillor Washington, for all of the years of service that you put in with regards to the Salmon Festival. It's a trademark of our community, and I sincerely hope that something can be pulled together in the future, and I see a few people in the audience here that would love to volunteer. Just saying.
And I'll just add that I, several times, being down at the new waterfront section of the SOMAS lands, I've heard members of the community say this is where Salmon Fest should be. So I think there's definitely, you know, an excitement around that, and especially with it being at Tyee Landing the last couple of times, I think just there's a natural extension there now that would bring kind of a new excitement to the event. So I think we should start planning early, probably now makes the most sense. Thank you. Okay, seeing no more hands up. New business, are there any items of new business councillors would like to bring forward? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to question period, and this is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions of City Council. Mr. Anderson.
I really don't want to be here, but I got to try and get some closure on this issue I talked about earlier on, and I'm sincere about that. I'm tired of it, and I'm sure a lot of other people are. And I wanted to deal with it before we get into an election period where I don't think this is a place to influence people on how they should vote, etc. And it very well, although I doubt it, will have some effect. So if I can just set the ground lines, I know there is certainly two questions. I refer to the questions I put forward to Councillor Poon a few months ago. So she recognized that she had told me who one of the contractors were, and was quite forthcoming to that, and I thanked her for that later on in the meeting, for being very open about that. And that she also had told the building department that information. And for now, ever since, this was one of the questions I asked in February 28th, 2020, when I met with Mayor Minions and Mr. CEO, Mr. Ply, and myself, and that was one of the questions I asked there. Who were the subcontractors and were they tradespeople? For 2.5 years, I still wait to get an answer. I got it from the very person that I thought you'd have gone, Helen Poon. I knew that a long time. So my question, and I'm sorry, Mr. Ply, but I have to ask these questions from my own. She can correct me on that, but I will talk to that. Thanks for informing me that. Madam Mayor, I'll direct these questions to Mr. Ply. Did you know who the subcontractors were over the last 2.5 years that I've asked you that question?
Was there a second question there coming?
I'll ask one at a time, because the second question will determine what the answer is here.
Madam Mayor, I was not aware of who the contractor was at any point until just recently.
Thank you.
When was recently? Was it when? The reason I'm asking that is a little concerned whether who's giving me the factual information, Ms. Poon or yourself. Ms. Poon says she informed you and I assumed, but maybe wrongly, that it was at the same time that I asked that when she talked to me about the contractor.
Madam Mayor,
or was that since then, since I asked the questions of Ms. Poon?
Madam Mayor, I was informed anecdotally who one of the contractors was recently by Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
You were not told by Councillor Poon?
Madam Mayor, I was told anecdotally by Mr. Smith, and he told me that he heard it from Mr. Anderson.
Thank you.
At the meeting that we were at, which I wouldn't disclose and didn't. So I don't know who's, Helen Poon said you knew.
Yeah, Mr. Anderson, thank you. Is there another question?
Yes, I'd like to know, the permits were not initially taken out, and that was 2 years after the project started. When this citizen got up and did some investigation about the permits, couple of months later, there was no shutdown of the work, just kept on going. Then they were, the Kingsway were forced to take out permits. Now, when you take out permits, you're required to, well, it can be done by the business owner, it can be done by the subcontractors themselves. From what I understand, the subcontractors didn't do it, it came from the business owner. Correct me if I'm wrong. Now, when that's taken out,
this is not an issue that I'm able to correct you on.
well, I know, because you don't have the situational awareness. That's only Mr. Ply does.
No, the building department would.
Well, building apartment, here we go. We're playing our games. This is not going to end today. There's a whole lot of other stuff if we don't start being honest with each other.
Mr. Anderson, there is not a dishonesty here. There is not a dishonesty here with our staff. There is not a dishonesty here with our council. I understand you're not getting...
I haven't determined that yet.
Well,
and I
am telling you right now.
Well, I'm sorry.
Okay, Mr. Anderson, I think we have to continue this conversation another day. If there are additional questions, you are welcome to ask them. I have additional questions, and I'm going to ask them. You can ask the questions.
I asked this question in February 28th. Never got an answer. Now I'm hearing recently.
Well, now you're accusing our staff of dishonesty, which is not acceptable.
I am saying that I'll tell you what I am. I'm accusing the staff and council of no transparency, no accountability on this issue. On this issue I'm talking about. And I understand why you're upset. This is not an easy question to put forward to you. You're reluctant from day one, I'm talking about City Hall, to answer this question. What Ms. Poon was referring to, I asked the question, the building department, that would be the building inspector at the time, who kept in close contact with Mr. Ply. I know that for a fact. And I would be surprised didn't keep in contact with you, and I still got no answer to that question. I suspect there was no subcontractors, to be quite frankly with you.
I would never have engagement with the building department on who a subcontractor is. That's completely outside of my scope as mayor. That is an operational detail.
Yes, what do you call situational awareness, which you were never made aware of. No one picked up a phone to ask me. You just had blind faith on what you were told. We went through that before. Well, you were misled.
Okay, Mr. Anderson, this has gone outside of the scope of question period. So I'm going to call an end to your questions
because
at this point. You are welcome.
Answer,
no, not because we don't want to answer them.
Questions.
Because the questions have been asked and the questions have been answered.
When? Right now, the first time I ever heard, I've known recently, the first indication of any acknowledgement to that question.
Okay. Are there other members of the public who
So
would
there
like to
will
ask
be other
questions
questions
today?
that will go on, and it'll encompass a lot more than we've been talking about. You don't want to put this to an end because you're concerned about answering difficult questions.
I'm not at all concerned about answering difficult questions.
You are very much concerned. And Mr. Ply, I will have my say without anyone else tell me what I can and can't do. You have your say, and you can get up and contradict me if you wish. There's a reluctance to be transparent, and I didn't want to get into this. I was hoping this would be a simple answer to the simple questions. And why, for example, are penalties being assigned on Mr. Smith for his 4th Avenue thing? Penalties for not complying, and no penalty has been set against the contractors that worked on that building.
Okay.
Are
there members of the public who would like to ask questions today?
Hi, my name is Marilyn Kapczynski. I live in Port Alberni, and hello, everybody. I'd just like to ask 2 questions. And one is there now a public bathroom on Upper 3rd?
Thank you for that question. When our public safety building opens, which is...
When is that going to be? Sorry?
So I'm just finishing, if you could just
yes.
give me a moment. It is scheduled to finish construction in mid-August, and the building is scheduled to open in mid-September. There will be a public bathroom then on 3rd Avenue. That bathroom, however, will only be available when the building is open. There isn't an exterior entrance, so it's a bit of a solution, but there's more work that needs to be done on that still.
And my other question is, how's it going with the mobile shower that's been tooting around Port Alberni?
It's a great question. That is actually run by the Salvation Army, so it's not, I believe the city has given a permit to operate, but we don't have day-to-day awareness on how that's going. I do know that it's being used.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, come on forward.
Randy Fraser, 6115 Oxford Street. I have a few questions around the Somas Mill site. Back last year when the announcement was on purchasing the Somas Mill site, Madam Mayor, you had commented that the city had done its due diligence and before buying the mill site, and you had a level 1, level 2 reviews of the environmental part of the site, and that the cleanup would be less than $1 million. And now, just so we're talking the same thing, a level 1, stage 1, phase 1 environmental review is usually a historical detail or a historical existing of the records, photographs, visual sites, surrounding areas, who owns the land, and things like that. The level 2 becomes much more detailed, involving core samples, soil samples, groundwater testing, building sampling, all that sort of things. And then phase 3 would become more of the remediation plan that you have to do and all the details of that. So that was in the beginning of last year. And at the same time in the AV News, it was reported that SLR was the company that you hired to do a review of stage 1 and stage 2. And I know that SLR has done some work of reviewing reports along the properties along the lineal section of the train station, but couldn't find anything about the Somas Mill site. So the question is, was there a level 2 assessment done on the actual mill site?
Yes.
And what year was that done and by who?
Tim, am I able to answer this question?
Madam Mayor, let me start and you can chime in. During negotiations to purchase the Somas property and other associated properties, the previous owners shared with the city their stage 1 and their stage 2 for the Somas site, where drilling had been undertaken on the site. And they shared it under a non-disclosure agreement for the purposes of the city considering purchase. And then the city engaged SLR as our agent to review those documents and advise the city. All of that information, including SLR's information, is embargoed by the non-disclosure agreement.
So even the year it was done and by who?
I would say yes.
Okay. Well, I think we have a disagreement about what can be disclosed and not disclosed, which I think will resolve in a different venue. But also, back at the same time of the announcement of buying the mill, in the Nanaimo News, there's a quote from you, or I guess a comment from you, saying that environmental consultants did extensive testing and believe the cost will be less than $1 million. So was there somebody else that came in and did extra testing on the site? Or is that just a misquote?
No, there was testing done on the site.
Okay, who has done the additional testing?
I think that the answer's already been provided by Mr. Ply.
Was that SLR?
Madam Mayor, the testing on site was done by the previous owner's contractor, and SLR, engaged by the city, reviewed their data and gave opinion to the city.
Okay, I'm sorry. The reading the article, it sounded like you had hired somebody else to do additional testing. So the city hasn't hired anybody to do any testing on site?
No, so testing has been done on
Right.
site during the stage 2 as indicated, and that data has been reviewed by our consultant.
Right, okay. And then up in this year, but at the time Mr. Smith was the acting CAO, it's reported in the paper that he was working on a RFP for environmental assessment for him to do a more in-depth study on the Somas site. So what would that be entailing? Because I haven't seen the RFP for it.
Scott?
I guess I would say at this stage, that work has not proceeded.
Right. What are you looking for, a more detailed assessment of the site? You already did level 2.
We haven't crafted what that RFP would be, but as we know, in order to develop the site, further work will need to be due. Someone will need to apply for the province for an approval in principle and certificate of compliance. That work has not yet proceeded at this stage.
Certificate of compliance is a long ways down the road.
Certificate of compliance
Yeah,
takes
yeah.
an average of 24
Yeah.
months.
Yeah.
We have not begun that
No.
work.
So when in purchasing the site, did you ever do a rough cost estimate to demolish the old mill and have it all removed? Is there a cost for that idea?
Yes, we have done a cost estimate.
So are we able to know what that is?
We're going to be sharing our next steps on the SOMAS lands in the very near future. There's not anything additional that I can share today. However, we've let the public know that we continue to work on the redevelopment and that we'll be announcing our next steps very soon.
Correct. And also in the initial rollout of the purchasing, it talked about moving Dry Creek back to its original course.
It showed that as one
Option.
One consideration
Yes.
in the concepts that were being talked about,
Yeah.
yes.
So have you considered the cost of that, what that would cost to remove, to
No,
put it back?
that was an initial vision. Just like we haven't considered the cost to build out the project because we don't anticipate that we would take that work on ourselves.
Right.
We're not developers.
You think a developer's gonna pay to move that creek back? So did you also, in buying the site, did you hire any geotechnical people? We know that the mill site is infill on a mud flat. So have any geotechnical people done any work to see how suitable that site is to build on?
Tim?
Madam Mayor, I haven't seen any geotechnical reports, although there was some geotechnical data in the stage 1 report. Maybe stage 2. In one of the 2 reports, there was geotechnical data.
We're aware of what the site is.
Yeah. So also, but also you now own Harbor Road and realizing that Harbor Road is in need of a great amount of repair. So is there any plans or any cost estimates to upgrade Harbor Road at this time? The north end, it floods all the time and, you know,
As we do all the time, we have an infrastructure plan, we have a capital 5-year plan. We haven't moved Harbor Road up in any way over what, those road project would have been. It hasn't increased in priority.
Okay, also, and the last thing is, my last question would be, in the development part, have you given consideration of all the infrastructure costs that the city will be of making new improvements to access that facility, the water, the storm, the sewer, what access of roads come in, and the building of all of that cost will be on to you?
Well, that's an assumption.
Yes.
The building of all of those costs
Yep.
would not necessarily in any way be on us. However, yes, we have given a high-level consideration of what the redevelopment of that site would look like, and we intend to let the public know to communicate as soon as possible the next steps that will be taken.
We look forward to that.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Come on forward, Mr. Smith.
Roland Smith, 2702 11th. Thanks for the taxpayer-funded cooling center. Just a couple questions actually came up today. Page 25 on today's agenda. It said that the taxation for 2023 would have to increase by $710,000 or 2.77% with the amendments made to the 5-year financial plan today. So that's straightforward. So clearly next year, you're going to bump the rate to recover this money, correct? That's what this is saying? Do I have that correct?
Yes, that's absolutely what it's saying. However, that does not take into consideration non-market change. As we know, we've had a very significant amount of new development coming to our community. So these numbers will shift when the new developments come online, and we don't get that information until early in the new year.
Correct. Okay. So then on the lagoon, the option 2 was not passed today, Council, for the alternatives. You did the 450 for the American Process Group, but option 2 was to have 600,000 for the full scope of the plan. So is 450,000 a portion of this full scope? And if it's 450,000, the 600 was going to be borrowed from the 2023 capital plan. Presuming then that has to be replaced next year, that imputes another 2 or 2.5% tax increase. So have I interpreted that right? The 450 is a portion of the 600, or where are these numbers? If maybe the financial director can clear that up.
Come on forward, Andrew.
I've had other questions for Andrew, but let's start there.
Sure.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, so the tender that was received for the desludging was just over $1 million. So within the cost estimates for the lagoon, it was a $450,000 estimate for that. Within the contingency of the lagoon, there is some contingency that provides some room for that, but it is over what we had planned for the lagoon. Lagoon is coming from fees and services, not taxation, so that was all associated with the sewer fees that we collect through our fees and services billing. So that 600,000 or so, as the Director of Engineering stated, they need to look and see if they can bring that number down, but it is higher than what we expected for the lagoon, and that's why it's being held at the 450. And just to address the 2.77% increase, Council has the ability to look at the overall budget. That's just isolating that. All else being equal, that would be the increase for next year, just based purely on the dollar value over the current year's dollar value. So,
thank you. Okay. Come on up, Roland.
So, Director Dickinson mentioned, and you were mentioning, Madam Mayor, the smell. I have been over, but I haven't noticed it yet, so maybe my nose isn't working. But am I, the Director mentioned about not aerating it anymore. So aeration would be because there's water in it, correct? So if we're excavating dry sludge, I'm confused. If I could get a clarification, if we're going to take an excavator in there and they don't want wet material at the landfill, but we're not aerating, is there still water? Is that lagoon actually still full of water? And or what's happening there? Just for clarification.
Yeah, I believe the lagoon is drained, and that's why it's drying. Tim, am I right?
And the odor's coming from the soil. Okay, fair enough. That clears that up. So on March 7th at our E-Town Hall, we were discussing infrastructure. And you'd mentioned, Madam Mayor, about the city's following the Econics. There's obviously Associated Engineering has done a lot of work as well on the liquid waste management plan. And so drilling back into those documents, because you inspired me to do so by mentioning the reports, I went back and refreshed myself. So in fairness to the Director, I did contact him late last week and advised him I did want to ask these questions for the public record. But in that report that you mentioned, the public to look at, they mentioned that the annual contribution for asset renewal at the time in 2013 or 14 was 40% below the funding reliability for the annual cost of sustainable ownership. So, and that would be addressed by increased user fees, and I know the city's increased user fees. So I'm wondering whether the gap between the annual contribution for asset renewal and the annual cost of sustainable ownership has been narrowing with the increased user fees, in the context that the Director of Engineering mentioned that with borrowing for the SOMAS force main, that the sewer reserve fund is exhausted, meaning $0. So the Econics report had mentioned that they were anticipating about $500,000 in reserves at this time. So has to the Director of Finance, has that gap been closing between costs of sustainable ownership and the annual contribution for asset renewal? Yeah, let's start there. Sorry, Andrew, you're going to get lots of
That's
steps.
fine. I think that's a great question, and I'm sure Andrew's going to rush to answer it. I think from my perspective, at a high level, that report, we often talk about it as kind of the start to our asset management, and it is. It was a great step that, I think 2 or 3 councils ago took, and great that they had the foresight to take it. That said, it's a high-level report. It's not as detailed asset management as we need, and we have a lot more work to do on it. I would guess that our gap has been closing. However, over the last few years, we've seen astronomical price increases on things. So that, while that gap might have been closing, it's probably getting a lot bigger now, and we're all very aware of that. There's a lot more work that needs to be done. However, I think it was still a very worthwhile report and got us going on asset management. So it's something that we can move forward with, but a lot of updating to do. Andrew.
Yeah, so thank you, and I do appreciate that Mr. Smith gave me the heads up so I could answer these questions beforehand. So with the gap, I mean, we are managing that gap. There is still a gap. Obviously, you hit the nail on the head. You know, we're seeing cost escalations. It is a high level. We're looking at a long-term 20-year plan in that asset management, and there's been shifting priorities. So obviously, we saw the Argyle Force Main become a priority this year. You know, as we see these projects and the cost realization, we're just managing those gaps. I know the Director of Engineering would like to have a more detailed, longer-term and cost escalation factored into a lot of these asset management plans that we're starting to dive into. So, you know, we do have some high level, we have some identified projects, but we react to emerging issues that we need to address every year, and we adjust that plan and manage those gaps.
Thank you. Okay.
So I'm presuming to the director, and maybe if you don't have to come for this, is that with the inflation being quite aggressive, unfortunately, are those sewer rates, fees probably, I mean, I know you have a schedule, but and anything can change, but they're likely subject to maybe some aggressive increases to help us catch up, perhaps?
They might be subject to informed increases, but Andrew will come and answer that. Maybe not aggressive increases, as you put it, Roland.
So, Madam Mayor, the intent of increases is, and the plan was to have those smoothed out over time and look at this in a long-term fashion. So, you know, we might have seen a 0.8 increase in 2020 for CPI, a 2%, you know, what is it, 6 this year. It really has to smooth out, and we don't want to create any shocks to the public, but we do have to take into consideration the consumer price index increases year to year. So obviously this year will factor into that, but we try to make sure that we bring forward a smoothed out increase year over year, and not to react to CPI as it occurs.
Thank you. Roland?
So with respect to the funds, the internal borrowing, there's a repayment plan for the pumper truck, 5 years I think it was. There's a repayment plan of 10 years for the ladder truck. But I haven't seen a proposed schedule for repayment for the 700, if they borrow the 700. And also today's, we're borrowing from different reserves. I realize you're allowed to. It is our money. It's in a different pocket. But there's no statement about X amount per year for 5 years or 10 years or whatever. Are we approaching it the same way as we did for the ladder truck? We had to borrow extra, and also for the bumper truck. Are we doing the same thing?
Andrew, do you want to comment on that? I think today's was clarified specifically to be paid back through the $200,000 that is coming from EARTH, to be paid back through taxation next year, to replenish that right away.
So, Madam Mayor, that's a good question from Mr. Smith. It wasn't clear when we brought that forward, so ideally we'd like to pay it back next year, but there is the lack of funds in the sewer reserve. So as we work through the upcoming capital plan for 2023, we have to reset the priorities and shift depending on what is required, and then we can clarify what that might be as far as repayment. So it might be in 2023, but it might be more than likely in 2024. So we do have, you know, we'll have some clarity around that, but the original plan was to pay that back in 2023. So.
Thank you. Roland, do you have more questions?
I do. This should pretty much finish it up. So with respect to the plan, Associated Engineering did one in 2001. It was a 40-year plan. And for the purposes of that study, it's a 178-page report, also on the, or something like that, on the city's website. And for the purposes of that study and identifying all the CSOs and all this work we had to do, it was geared for being complete in 2041. We're halfway there. One of the things identified was that 41% of the 160 kilometers of sewer under the ground is CSO, and which is 66 kilometers of CSO. In 20 years, we've got 8.5 kilometers done. That imputes to 135 more years to get the piping done. So I sort of raised this issue during budget, was that it's my personal view that I don't think council is supporting management staff and then the bargaining unit, people that have to do it, or maybe even in overall budget for contractors, in that we won't even get half the work done, and we're going to have to go back and start repairing the stuff. So I don't know what's been done in the last 2 years, but Associated Engineering gave a report in July of 2020 over the 20 years of work that have been done. So I don't know what's been done. It was 8.5 kilometers at January 1, 2020. So obviously we've done 2 years worth of work, but that's a concern in that things won't be any cheaper than they are today. And rapid inflation is supposed to calm down, they say, but part of the planning, or which plan are we, I know you mentioned an update, we've got Associated Engineering, and then we've got Econics. So we've got two fairly good plans that have identified all of the stuff. I guess we really need to get down to it, but that sort of council's direction on supporting the budget might not be popular to people, or you might have to make other decisions. But you mentioned you were going to, I think 2 or so meetings ago, Madam Mayor, that you needed to update the plans. So are we sort of looking at these 2 existing plans and modernizing them per se? And that's all for today. Thanks.
Thank you. I think there's some great questions there on asset management. I think one piece that I did want to note is that you're completely right on the lack of work that's been done on separating storm and sewer and the combined sewer overflow issues. We have, of course, turned our attention to that more recently around our sewage lagoon approvals and permitting. And I'm sure you probably caught that we just applied for 100% funding grant to do a really important section of Argyle, where we're actually getting the most days of the year in combined sewer overflows. So we're really aware that that work needs to be done, and that there's a lot of it, and that it has not been done at the pace that it needs to. But we are dedicated to doing it. Council has committed to $1.5 million, $1.3 million, thank you, you two in the back, $1.3 million a year to do that work. And I know it's easy to say that now, it's harder to do it next year and the year after and the year after and the year after. But we have been moving forward with taxing for these projects. And unfortunately, it's been challenging over the last few years because things continue to get more expensive. But we're committed to doing the work, and we are very much recognizing that that combined sewer overflow work is probably the most important thing for us to be getting to right now, and that it just hasn't been done at the level it needs to. If I may. Yep.
Sorry, this Councillor Haggard had mentioned trails, and it twigged me. Just as an operational thing, if someone in the city can look after it. I'm a regular walker at Sexus Walkway, and again, this is not a critique of the people who are trying to do the work. But there's a section of that walkway from where Margaret Street comes down from Compton, and that stretch that goes around, and the blackberries are like they're hanging out over. I saw little kids the other day riding their bikes, and they're low, and those branches are, and so they got their helmets on, but little kids are little kids, and I see the public are trying to break them, but we go out with our bare hands. We're not able to deal with those. So that vegetation really needs to be, if someone could just look into that, and that would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. We'll pass that along. I see Tim making a note. Okay, any other questions from members of the public today?
Am I allowed to make a comment?
Yep, absolutely. Councillor Haggard, and then I'll call on you in a moment, Joseph.
I would like just to make a clarification from a member of the public during public input period. He indicated that he requested 10 minutes to speak and he was cut off after 4 minutes. I checked the YouTube video. He started talking at 43:49 and finished at the 50.30 mark. So according to my calculations, that he talked for 7 minutes and 21 seconds. So a little bit less than the 10 minutes, but significantly more than the 4 minutes he indicated.
I think he did say that he pushed a little to speak more, but I think the point there is, and I had looked back at the email, he did intend to book a delegation, and that just was not clear to us. So it was very much just an error. Yeah, thank you for that. Joseph, come on forward.
My name's Joseph Laskosic. I live at 4381 Princess Road. I could have left this alone, but I thought I can ask it or pop into City Hall. I'm just curious, it's not today's approval of the development on Bird and Fifth that I'm questioning or bringing up this question for, but just for development in general when it's approved. Is there a timeline if nothing happens on that where eventually it expires and they have to reapply?
Yes, Scott, do you want to speak to that?
So in that case, often once it goes through a public process and if council grants third reading, there's often conditions that go back to a developer to meet. And we require those conditions to be met before it comes back to City Council. If an application is sitting idle, for instance, and they're not, we will follow up in writing with those applicants, basically saying, where are you with that application? If there's not satisfactory, response, we would bring something to council or information to council and basically ask council to close that file. Well, yes, but I can't say that it's a specific timeline because often the conditions vary greatly between one development application and another, right? So some take longer, and if progress is being made, then we'll work with them. But other ones are quite simple and happen quite quickly. So, but yeah, we don't let them sit like vacant forever without coming back to council.
Thank you.
So the second question is kind of related to that. So are there funds paid when there's somebody that goes forward and wants to get a proposal and get it approved and all that? Is there some sort of funds paid, not as a guarantee, because there is no guarantee really, not to ensure, but to promote the actual build? Is there funds paid to the city that they hold on to and say, okay, this is just held in lieu of, to just to promote the fact that you're going to do it and see it to completion? Is that a case where there's something paid, or is just nothing? It's just, yeah,
Sure.
I'm just curious.
Scott, I think he's asking if, I mean, of course, there's the building permit and development fees, but is there a security bond?
Again, it can vary on the application. So, and a lot of them are, for instance, in some of these larger projects, off-site infrastructure is required, and the developer is responsible for those expenses. Those are often taken either, say, in case of a subdivision, as part of a subdivision approval process, or in case of a building, as part of either the off-site, a servicing agreement with them, or as part of a building permit application. But then there's also building permit fees. Development cost charges are a fee that are paid, and they go to specific reserve accounts to be used for infrastructure. So there's a variety of different options there, but as far as if someone's just rezoning something, there isn't a charge. There's an application fee to help process it, but there isn't a charge if they're successfully rezoning. It's the development itself that can attract a whole variety of different types of fees or off-site costs that they'd be responsible for.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson?
Just one question, if I may ask it to Mr. Smith. It's on when someone is applying for a building permit, and it's, let's say, applied by the owner rather than the individual contractors who may do that and are responsible and accountable to do that. So the building owner applies for it. In order to get those permits for the let's say the sub-trades, plumbing, electrical, structural, etc., do you request the name of those subcontractors?
Scott?
It would vary on the type of permit and the work that is being done.
Yes.
But as part of an application form, you're asking who's responsible for the work. So sometimes they're under the purview of a professional, an architect or an engineer. Sometimes, if it's a simpler permit, it might be the contractor who's saying, I'm doing this, and then they have sub-trades underneath. If someone's building a house, you know, you're probably on the building permit, maybe just having the general contractor. But, you know, so that's, it does kind of vary, but yes, we do ask for the work that's being, for the work that's being done, who is doing that work.
Thank you.
Okay. Would somebody like to move adjournment?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Paulson, seconded by Councillor Solda. On the motion, all in favor? Carried.